Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to an all new Let's Draw. I'm your host BJ Dell, and in today's video, which is part 2 in the Drawing from Your Imagination series, we're going to take the sketch that we made from part 1 and add inks to it. We're going to learn how to ink, the importance of line weights, and how you can effectively use line weights to convey where a light source is coming from in your designs. So, if you want to learn all about that and more, keep watching. All right guys, so let's go ahead and jump into the video today, all about how to ink your creations. If you guys didn't watch yesterday's video, I recommend you hop back and check that out. I'll link it up in a card up top here. We talked about how to draw something from your imagination, and I drew this mouse holding a piece of cheese. We started out with basic shapes to kind of build up the idea that we had in our head, and then went back in and then kind of fine-tuned that sketch. So we actually had 2 different sketches. There was stage 1 and then stage 2. This is going to be the one that we inked today, so definitely hop back and check out that video. For today's video too, I'm using the iPad Pro 12.9 inch. This is the first gen model. The app is Procreate along with the first gen Apple Pencil. But before we hop in there, I want to talk about brushes. So for this tutorial, I'm going to use the standard inker brush as well as the standard inker streamline brush. These are custom brushes that I made. If you guys are following along with Procreate and want to pick these up, I will link down below the link to Gumroad. That's where you can purchase this brush pack. Those are the 2 that we're going to be using today. But we're first going to talk about brushes in general and how to think about inking. So these brushes, like I said, made from scratch to mimic a brush pen, which I'm going to move the iPad out of the way here for a second. And we're going to bring in some actual paper here. So I know some people are going to flip out about this because we're using actual paper and pens, so this is going to be like a little bit of a traditional piece here for this first time on the channel. But this one is a Pigma MB brush pen. You can see here the tip is just kind of a brush. That's why they're called brush pens. But this is what the standard inker in my cartooning brush set mimics. I made that to kind of have the same feel. The pressure sensitivity is set the same so you can get the same stroke. So one thing starting out, I guess, that I've seen before on the channel in the comment section is someone a couple months ago left a comment that said, how can you call this digital art? It's not art. You're not making anything. The computer is doing all the work for you. And that's not the case at all. I know anybody that actually does digital work, sure to agree with me that you do have to have a skill set, and there are a lot of techniques that you need to possess to be able to make art digitally, just like traditionally. I think a lot of people think the computer does the work, which is not the case. Likewise, I know there's been comments and I get messages and DMs from people that download the brush set, and especially the inker brush. They say, okay, I think this is broke, or I don't think this is the brush that you're actually using in the video. You must have a setting different from what I downloaded because mine doesn't look like yours. And the reason is because there's a technique to use the brush. So a lot of people either don't understand that the Apple Pencil and the iPad, does have the pressure sensitivity, and they just draw really heavy-handed. So using this brush, I'm going to show you that people will draw that and say, okay, that looks nothing like your lines in the video. With my lines, I get a nice taper at the end, or the start here, and I get a nice taper here at the end, and it's thicker here through the center. So they just keep going over and over, doing the same thing, expecting the same results. And that's not the way the brush is set up. That's why I love digital art, is because the techniques that you use with traditional really kind of go over to the digital side. So the key to really getting a nice line out of these brushes is all about the pressure that you apply, the kind of technique that you use with your hand. And if you see here, mostly I'm not moving my wrist. You can see my entire arm is moving. And I've talked about this before in videos of how to get nice lines. And that's really the technique that you need to use, is move your whole arm all the way up to your shoulder to do these lines. So starting out with this line, I'm going to press down very lightly. As I go down and into the stroke, I'm going to press harder and then pull up and kind of swipe away as I let up at the end. And you'll see the taper that I get here is really nice. So I've got a nice taper here at the beginning and tapers here at the end as well. So this is just by, like I said, pressing down lightly here, pressing down lightly here, and in the center, pressing down harder. So it's just a continuous motion, light to hard to light, and that's going to give you those tapers. That's why I think people are confused when they download brushes or they see brushes. That's one of the most common questions and comments I see, not only in my videos, but just anybody that does digital art online is, what brush did you use? What brush did you use? The brush itself is just a tool. There's still a technique that goes into this. The case in point that makes me laugh is people think, like I said, digital does all the work for you, and it's not the case. You still have to have that technique. Just thinking about, you know, Bob Ross tutorials and back in the 80s, and you know, if someone would go to Bob Ross and say that, okay, I bought the exact same brushes you have, I bought the same canvas, the same paint, but mine doesn't look like yours. So I think your brushes are broke, or I think that the paint's off. What's the problem? Why does mine not look like yours? And you know, that's just a ridiculous thing to think about, but it's really the same thing now. A lot of people say, you know, they just assume that everything's gonna work like they see it in the videos, and it still takes practice. It still takes practicing your technique and getting this down to a science. So wanted to bring that up first before we jump back in. And then let's pull out actually one more piece of paper here. If you guys are following along traditionally and you do want to ink and you don't have a actual brush pen like this, you can also make different line weights with just a regular marker here. So let's just show you here. Let's do it with a brush pen first. So I'm going to draw, let's just draw an eye here. So you see I've got this heavier line back here, and I've got this heavier here, and that kind of fades up here, fades out here. So the line weight is really focused on this backside and this underside. Of course, if you're using a regular marker, you're not going to be able to achieve that same effect with just basically pressing lighter to harder. So if we do this and draw the exact same thing, you can always go back in and thicken up your lines just by going back over them like so. So if you are following along with these tutorials and you don't have a brush pen, but you do want to have some nice line weights, that is how you can achieve the same effect. Personally, I prefer the brush pen because you get it all in one stroke. It looks a lot more natural. This is going to look a little bit choppier, but that is one of the other ways you can approach it. So I just wanted to throw that out there as well. So let's hop back over to the iPad now. And we're going to talk about line weights in general. So with line weights, the reason why they are so important is because they really give the viewer an idea of where the light source is coming from before you even add in, you know, any colors or highlights or shadows. So let's say in this, we're going to have the light source coming in from this top right-hand corner coming down. So a thicker line weight is going to represent a shadowed area. A thinner line weight is going to be closer to your light source. So with this, of course, this top ear here, you're going to have a lighter line up here. Down here, you're going to have a heavier line. And then pretty much like on this side here, these are going to be heavier than this side here just because of where that light source is coming in. So that's really the important part of where the line weights come into play. Gives you, like I said, a lot of depth and dimension before you even add in color. So let's go ahead and start outlining this. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer up here. This is going to go on top of our sketch layer. I'm going to drop the opacity down just a little bit more for this. And of course, this is the digital way to do stuff. If you're following along at home and you're just drawing with pencil and paper, this is where you would take the pencil and then switch over to the marker or the ink and go over top. And then after you're done, you would go and erase the pencil that you started out with. Likewise here, if you're using digital, after you get done with the inks, then you would just turn off the sketch layer. That's why we're doing these on two different layers. So that being said, let's go ahead and get in here. Like I said, I'm using the standard inker brush. And of course, different line weights, you can achieve those too by changing the overall size of your brush in addition to the pressure sensitivity. So let's go ahead and kind of zoom in here. And I think I just kind of want to start out here with the eyes. So we'll get those in here first. With Procreate, it's kind of nice because you can do these circles. If you hold down, and then with your other finger, hold down again, it's going to lock that in into a perfect circle. So that's kind of fun to do. You don't have to worry about making it perfect. See, I want this one to be an oval, but if you hold down, it would switch it to a circle like so. But I want that oval shape. I want these to be two different sizes there. Let's go ahead and get the pupils in here. erase here. Whoops, switch over to my standard inker eraser. Get the kind of glare there coming out of the pupils. Make that bottom one a little bit smaller. There we go. Now for areas like this, like the nose, I'm gonna go ahead and switch over to my standard inker streamline. I like this if I'm doing kind of curving motions like that. This will kind of lock them in and keep the lines a little bit smoother. So this is the part where digital does a little bit of the work, so to speak. But you'll see here, we're still gonna be drawing quite a bit on our own unassisted. So got that in. I'm gonna switch back to just the standard here to get these kind of creases over the eyes. Just these lids here, like so. I'm gonna make some pretty heavy ones here for the eyebrows over top. And then I think I wanna do the outline of the head next. So for this, once again, it kind of zooms around. So I'm gonna use the standard inker streamline for this one and just kind of follow this. So here, since this is kind of facing in this direction where the light's coming in, I'm gonna have this kind of a little bit lighter here. As it comes down and around, it's gonna get thicker, and then lighter here at the top, because once again, this is where the light source is up here. Pull this down and around. So this side's gonna be closer to the light source, so as this comes down and around, I'm gonna have this thinner than that back side. Pulling up the cheek here, like so. This line here is going to be a little bit thicker on this left side, a little bit thinner here, but it's still going to be thick up here because you've got the shadow from it sitting underneath the chin here. So we'll bring that down like that. These shoulders coming in here, one on the back being just a little bit thicker than this front one here. Then let's do the ears next. So of course here, like I said, light source is coming in from this direction. So these lines up here, a little bit thinner. As they come down and around, gonna get thicker down here. And like I said, it's just all based upon the pressure that you're applying to the brush as it comes down and around. The thicker that you want the line, the harder that you press down. I'm gonna do that one more time so you guys can see here, just lighter here, and then thicker as we come down here. Like so. I'm gonna erase that little overlap here. And then we'll do the same thing on this ear over here. A little bit lighter here, heavier. And then this one, I wanna go a little bit heavier here since it is a little bit further away, but I don't wanna go too heavy because I wanna save that really heavy for down here at the bottom like that. So we've got that, and we can get the insides of the ears here. Bringing those down and around. Zoom in a little bit on this one. The other thing you'll see too with my tutorials, I do a lot of erasing and undoing if I don't like a line. Don't worry, just hop back in, undo it, redo it. I'll redo the same line over and over again until it looks right. I try not to do it too much in these videos because I know it gets annoying to watch me just draw the same line over and over again. So I'll try to get it right on the first time, but if you don't, honestly, I do this constant undo when I'm working solo and not recording myself. So don't feel bad if it doesn't turn out right the first time. So as we pull back here, you can really start to see the difference in the thicknesses here. They're becoming pretty apparent. You can kind of see how this is going to be shadowed later on. I'm going to draw this little cutout here in the ear, like so. Now we can go ahead and start to work on the cheese here. So once again, this line is going to be thicker back here. I'm going to go over top of the fingers here, and we'll talk about that in a second. Same thing here. This line is going to be thicker down here. I'm going to make it a little bit thinner pulling up here. I'm going to switch back to the streamline here too. Just get a little bit smoother of a line. A little bit thinner there. Make this one thicker as it comes back on itself here. Like so. It's going to be a little bit thicker. It's going to be furthest away from the light source here as far as the back of the cheese. And we'll pull this one down here, getting it thinner here towards the front. And then let's go ahead and match these up a little bit better. And you'll see I've got some overlap here that I need to cut out because I've got that section where the bite is. So I'm just going to go back and erase now. We'll pull that back out of there. All right, and then let's go ahead and knock in those little cutouts for the bite. I don't need to pull this out too here. And once I get these in, I'll have to redo those shoulders. Usually I would do this on 2 separate layers, and I'll talk about that here in a second once we get to those fingers. Get that, and I think I'm going to redo this shoulder just a little bit because I want it to come down so it doesn't look like it's butting into this. This is where really it's kind of one of those things. The sketch I use more than anything else is just a suggestion of where everything goes. I'm not really worried about tracing exactly my sketch. That's just kind of a guide to show me, okay, this is the general area where everything goes. It's not something you have to stick to. Let's go ahead and get this mouth in here. So once again, I'm going kind of thicker here on the side. I'm going to pull it down and around here. So lighter there towards the front. And we'll go ahead and get these whiskers in here too. There we go. I think under the eyes too, I'm just going to have some little lines here. Start these thicker and kind of pull up as I go, so I get this nice little taper here. See, I've got even, different line weights in this. It just makes for a lot more interesting piece, varying these line weights, and it's really going to help to build up your design. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and make a new layer. So a lot of times for inking, this is where I will use 2 different layers to ink. That way you saw here kind of how that was a hassle of erasing stuff and going back in and redrawing and fixing. And the reason I wanted to show that was because I wanted to show this next of how I go about not having to do that. So I made a new layer for these fingers, and then I'm going to pull these down and around. Once again, kind of thicker line here at the bottom and on the sides. Going to have a little bit thinner here towards the front. And since this one is kind of closer here, I want this to be a bigger one than these. So I've got the fingers there, and you'll see there's the overlap. But since we made this 2 separate layers, we can actually go in here now to that base sketch or the base inking layer, and we can just erase those overlapping parts without erasing those fingers that we just did. And this makes it a lot nicer, a lot easier. You see, we don't have the same problems that we had up here. So that's just a fantastic way of being able to save yourself some time and some headaches of erasing and kind of touching stuff that you already did and having to go back and redo. So we're going to do the same thing over here. Once again, we're still on that finger layer here, and we're going to pull these down and around like so. Kind of want that one a little bit more angled. There we go. And this, I want to make sure that these are kind of the same size. That first one's a little bit bigger than what I wanted. So let's just redo that one real quick. And those look a little bit better there. So let's go ahead and erase the overlap again. And you'll see how much easier that is. Just a huge time saver there. So now that we've got that drawn in, let's go ahead and get these circles drawn in. Here, now that we're done with the overlaps, we can go ahead and pinch those together, and those are back to one layer now. And then we're just going to draw these circles here. So I'm just going to, once again, just use that kind of cheating tool with the circle here. Locking this in and holding down like so. The other thing to remember too with line weights is inside your design here. So like these are obviously not the outlines. These are inside the actual character design. You usually want those lines to be thinner than your outside lines. You always try to keep your exterior outlines thicker than anything that's inside the actual design. So keep that in mind as well. All right, so we've got those. Let's go ahead and get this body in here now. So I'm gonna start on this backside. Once again, gonna be thicker here and here because number one, this is underneath the cheese, so there's a shadow there. And then also thicker on this backside because once again, we've got that light source coming in from this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of pull down here, pull it up and around. A little heavier down here since it is at the bottom, and then pulling back up into there. See, you got a nice line weight there. Nice taper coming off here. I'll do kind of another fold here for the belly, which you see I didn't have that actually in the design starting out, but it's in there now. So there we go. Let's go ahead and get these feet. Here's a little trick too. We'll go ahead and do this, make a new layer here for the feet. And I'm gonna go ahead and draw a line here. Pull this up and down and around like so. There we go. So we got 1 foot there. Erase this so it matches up a little bit better. Now let's go ahead and that layer, let's go ahead and slide that to the left, and we're going to duplicate that. So now we've got a right foot or a left foot here, and then we've got a second layer of a foot. So I'm going to go up to my arrow here, and I'm going to transform this by flipping it horizontally, and then I'm going to pull this, make sure magnetic is selected. I'm going to pull this, oops, over here to the side, and I've got my second foot there, so they're the same size. The only thing here though, and why that I wouldn't do this, is because once again, we've got the light source coming in here. So this really doesn't match up well with the line weight that we're trying to achieve. However, the reason I wanted to do this is because getting the same size foot from left to right is pretty important. So I can go ahead and drop the opacity of this foot now, like so. And I can use this as a guideline now. This is gonna be almost my sketch layer to make sure that they line up right and they look the same. So I'm gonna go back down to my regular inking layer. And then once again, heavier line down here. What you're gonna see now is I'm gonna make a lighter line here at the top. So it's gonna be heavier right here because there's gonna be a little bit of overlap, but then I'm gonna pull it down lighter as it comes down and connects here. So you can see this one's got a lot more as far as line weight goes than this one, and it really kind of brings home that idea that this one is set closer there to the light source. So that's why sometimes you can get away with, you know, kind of cheating and duplicating and moving around, but when it doesn't work with the light source, like in this case, you definitely want to kind of rethink about duplicating and just using the same thing from the left to the right hand side. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and let's delete this sketch foot over here. And then let's go ahead and pinch these together. So now we're once again back to one single layer for our lines. And I'm going to go back to the standard inker streamline. I think I want to go ahead and make a new layer again because I want to get this really nice and wrapped around, and I'm going to do that by going over top of these lines that I've already done. So once again, I can go ahead and just drop that and erase really easily. So standard inker streamline. Here with the tail, I want the bottom to be quite a bit thicker than the top. So this bottom line is going to be heavier than what the top line is going to be. So once again, pulling this heavier down and around, up, and then lighter coming down here, and then a little bit heavier here because it's going to have that kind of shadow from the cheese coming there. And then, like I said, adding the second layer there, we can erase here without erasing any of our lines there. And then once again, pinching these back together, we can combine those into one layer. And now I'm going to get the little kind of marks along the tail. So switching back to the standard inker, make a smaller brush here. And once again, just with the pressure sensitivity, we just want that nice little taper for these lines. So it starts out thick where it comes in from the base, and then towards the center, it starts to taper off. And just alternating from left to right. Like so. So now let's go ahead and turn off our sketch layer. And what we're left with is our basic inking layer. This is gonna be ready for colors and ready for shadows and highlights, which are gonna be achieved a little bit easier because, like I said, using the different line weights, we kind of know where everything's going already. So that's it for today's tutorial. Tomorrow, day 3 in this series is going to be talking about the coloring. It's going to be talking about where to put the shadows and where to put the highlights. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this new set of videos. If you guys haven't yet, hop on over to Facebook. I've got a art group over there called Keep Creating, a Learn, Draw, Share art community, which I will link in the description below. A bunch of artists joining every day, sharing their artwork. You can share, art from these tutorials. I also have a weekly art challenge that you can take part in and post your work from that on there, or just share anything that you're creating in general. So definitely hop on over there and join. As for me, I can be found online, bjdell.com, as well as on Instagram and Twitter at bjdell. So until next time, keep creating.